expecting Travis, or is Travis?
I did not hear otherwise.
Yeah, I did.
Sue, you didn't hear?
Nothing from Travis. Okay. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The roll call will show everyone present except Mr. Routh. We expect him to be joining shortly. We have an agenda in front of us. Mr. Mayak, are there any additions or corrections?
There is a addition in the sense that the World's Best Workforce presentation has been added. That was an agenda item without the presentation included. And so now the presentation is included in the agenda.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schoenrock, seconded by Mr. Mueller to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll start this evening with some public comments. We appreciate Mr. Petzinger getting a hold of us early to prepare us. I would just have a short reminder out to board members that this is not an action item that we are expected to act on this evening. It's informational purposes only, but we welcome Mr. Petzinger to.
If I can clarify, there's two public speakers.
Oh, great.
Mr. Petzinger and Mrs. Petzinger.
Excellent.
And learning a little bit about the presentation, there'll be a lot of information thrown at you with
Sure.
a request, and then it would be up to you to, I would agree, it doesn't have to be a action item,
Sure.
and there could be a statement.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
We'll see where it leads.
Yeah.
Welcome again.
We don't mind.
Well, I was going to add a portion in there that we generally limited to 5 minutes. But
Well, I'll get this done in five.
Okay, fair enough. No, make yourself comfortable, and again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm here representing Petzinger Media Group. I've established that throughout the years of doing live streaming for wrestling. This year, we have tried to go through the same avenues as we did before for continuing live streaming for the wrestling season, for the 22-23 wrestling season. However, this year we got told no, we cannot. And that came from Sean Larson and through Dan Stork. There's been some, in my opinion, some misunderstanding as far as what the contract with NFHS and what that all entails or what that precludes the school from doing. One of the things that I have done is I've reached out to my attorneys that deal with copyrights and litigation when it comes to events and stuff like that. What we've determined is that is not a contract, it is an agreement. And when they have statements in the agreement that says for clarification, at that point, that clarifies that whole paragraph and then basically puts it in layman's terms. I'm not here to say, NFHS, don't do it. That's not what I'm doing. What I want to do is continue doing what I'm doing, which is a completely different set of content. Yes, it's at the same event, but it's created with different content. And so therefore, under copyright laws, they're not allowed to prohibit me from doing my own content. If I was pulling their cameras and their stuff, that would be a different story. However, I'm creating my own content with my own equipment, and I do all my own commentary. I would like to proceed on doing that for the following years as to come, and I'm requesting clarification from the board as far as, is media outlets allowed to do what media outlets do, or are we going to say one media outlet can do it like Owatonna Live, but Petzinger Media Group cannot? Because I think that there's a misunderstanding as far as what's being allowed and what's not being allowed as far as the live streaming for the school events. So I ask for either a comment clarifying this or some sort of a action item to then alleviate this hurdle at this point. Because I am coming to you as a media outlet, not as Damon Petzinger myself. So I would be the same as Owatonna Live or any other radio or TV news station. So that's what I would like to statement, because I think it's a very good product. I think there's only good that comes of it, and I've seen athletes being more watched by recruiters and stuff because of it. And we actually, when I was a wrestling coach, because I'm currently not under the circumstances, the athletes use it very religiously on becoming better athletes. They're able to instantly rewatch their stuff, which with the other product that wrestling has, they can't do that very readily. They do have something called Matt Boss, but that's a different platform that's normally used for statisticians and stuff like that. So that's what I have.
I guess just for a little clarification too, I think one thing I would just like to share, and not probably speaking for an individual on the board, but I've heard good things about your product. So I think, you know, that isn't an issue here, that there was any dissatisfaction with quality of what you've done in the past or are doing currently. I think back to the technicalities, and Mr. Mayak and myself have talked briefly about it. I believe you involved the contract on your last newsletter to the board, so we saw that somewhat. I guess I would caution us as a board. I think this is something that the administration has to make sure that we aren't in violation of a contract, you know, versus our opinion. I know you reached out to an attorney, but maybe based off of administration's research or where it falls into where we're not violating something.
I would like to add a couple other things. Number one, I tried to work with Sean Larson starting in June, and I was always kind of pushed off. So this, I apologize for the late kind of urgency of this, but it was something that I felt was the better avenue to go down. It just happened that we didn't get the official no until after the last board meeting was done. The second thing is we do need to have some sort of a resolution to this tonight, because if I get either no action or a no, I don't have enough time to finish doing the stuff with Minnesota State High School League for all the postseason and things like that I need to for up at the state wrestling tournament or at the section tournaments, because all that needs to be submitted by December 1st.
This is complicated, obviously. That, again, I would say the timing of this is a big part of kind of this situation. And the request that was made by Dan was, will we continue to allow outside entities access to sporting events if it's a radio station to come in and broadcast the game, if it's Owatonna Live, if it's your business to come in and broadcast. That, at first the request was that we would have an action item that says, yes, we would allow
Petzinger Media Group.
Petzinger Media Group to continue to do what they have. And I said we wouldn't need to do that, because we're not going to call any radio station or anyone else to make this an official action, that we will continue to allow agencies to come in and broadcast. So you clarified too that you would like a statement that says the district will continue to allow those sorts of things to take place.
Correct. So in that way, then.
So is it broadcasting of our sporting event? Is that, I mean, is it that generic that? Again, I'm back to that, we haven't created that type of an action item for a radio station. I mean,
Or would we?
Right.
Right. And so my statement in our kind of our pre-board meeting conference here was, I don't believe that's necessary.
Right.
That if the district believes, and the board would say, yes, of course, we're going to allow radio, that's the easiest example. We're going to allow radio stations to come in to broadcast a game while NFHS is live streaming that, is there a difference between allowing that and allowing a streaming service to do the same thing? And so I would say as a statement, we will continue the practices that we have allowed in the past. If we find out that this agreement, and it does say agreement, is stronger than you believe it is, and that we're more liable to the, or more
Right.
responsible to these words, we would have to have that continued conversation. That doesn't help with your timeline.
Correct, no, it doesn't, but one of the things that we'll establish at that point in time, that if I can't do it, then nobody can.
Right.
And
right.
so therefore, then it becomes a level playing field at that point.
Right.
But you guys only have 2 years left on that contract, or
Right.
that agreement anyway, so. That's before all of a sudden there's no fine for quitting it, so. But again, I'm not saying that we need to do away with NFHS. I really don't want anything more to do with it. But in the prior years, I actually was simulcasting mine on YouTube and NFHS, so they were exactly the same because mine is much better. And for those that were paying for it, I just figured it was a service to the school, giving them a better product than what NFHS was doing. And that's the reason why I did it in the past. I will not continue to do that moving forward. I have my own content, they have their own content. And keeping it separate like that, it allows me under copyright to be able to do what I do. But like I say, you know, the school board does have the approval, or does have the ability to say no broadcast media in there. And basically what I'm asking for is that the school is in support of broadcast media.
Which is a past practice that
Right.
we've been allowing, that
Right.
to us, again, speaking just in my own opinion, it doesn't mean that the entire board needs to believe this, but I think no action is the answer in this particular case from a standpoint of, we're not going to
We're
ask
not
anyone to
making any
leave.
changes.
Right, we're not making any changes. The concern I would have is if I haven't done the research that you have attorney-wise with the agreement we have with the other broadcaster, whatever
And NFHS.
Yeah, whatever that is.
It-
That's where my concern was, is if we're violating a previous agreement that was done ahead of that. But if we're not, I don't think there's a problem here.
So if we say no action, does that still allow him to do his content?
There would be no changes to our past practice.
Right.
Okay.
It's just reinforcing that you have allowed this action
Right.
of broadcast media, correct? Is that what you're stating? Is that
Well,
past
I
practice
don't
is
know if we
allowed?
would, I don't know if we would,
Because that's basically
we would
what,
specify who.
I'm not saying who,
right,
just
we're allowing-
broadcast as a whole.
Right. If Owatonna Live wanted to come in and do something, we wouldn't say, wait a minute.
Correct, and that's
And
not what I'm
so
saying here.
it is what-
I don't want exclusivity, I just want to have it so that it's
You
open
can.
for any media that wants to do it. Because I
Right.
think any media coverage is good for the school.
Absolutely. No, and again, back to, I wish we could compliment you more on the product you're putting out there, because yeah, if we've got athletes that are getting value of going back and watching their match and learning, that's what we want. We are in full agreement with that. It's just that we have to respect contracts.
Right.
If that's,
And there is probably some potential difference of opinion on an agreement versus a contract. And, you know, at this point, the statement you're making is, I guess I don't have any contention with that unless we found out otherwise.
Correct.
You know, if the NFHS police would come and
Right.
say, you're violating this,
We
this
have to
this
look
is
at
a
it.
fine or penalty, we would pull the plug on the radio station, you know, anyone else, Owatonna Live, Petzinger Media Group, to say, ooh, geez, we've learned more information.
This is a 4-year contract?
5.
5, and we're in year
3.
3. One would think they were going to gripe, it would have happened by now.
Correct.
I mean, they have kind of in a sense, waived issues by not speaking up. Be one argument we could make. I don't know that we want to get into arguments.
Right,
That's kind of the problem.
We're fortunate to have an attorney with us here this night. I mean, and that's very valuable information, Joanne.
Does the contract with them effectively say that all other media sources are off the table? I guess, I mean, that's where I'm,
That was a
Little
question
torn on
again.
it.
Is there a difference between a radio
Right.
broadcast and a
so
YouTube
is
live?
NFHS saying you can't have anybody else come in?
The,
You know, that's the way, I guess that's the way I would read that, is if they're not letting
we
Danny come
agreed,
in, then they don't want anyone doing it.
the agreement that we signed states that the school agrees to live broadcast all regular season sport events at all competition levels in the venue where the Pixelot systems are installed, which is obviously the NFHS systems.
Right.
School has a right to determine on-demand availability of regular season events through blackout window. School grants Play On, NFHS, the right to live broadcast all postseason events in the venue where the Pixelot systems are installed. Schools will not permit any third party to stream any regular season sports events that would be deemed competitive with Play On activities.
Which,
No, we can let student groups, as a part of our curriculum, do that.
Read the last sentence in that.
For a state of clarity, for the sake of clarity, events selected by the school or the school's co-broadcast will also be broadcasted to the NFHS network via the Pixelot system.
And the reason that they put that in there is they want to at least carry the content. They don't want any third party to come in and say, no, Petzer Media Group can be the only one that stream it and NFHS can't. And I don't care how many people are there. And that's why that clarity is sitting in there, is to basically state, like, for the wrestling home triangular, if Petzer Media Group is there, NFHS is also going to carry that. That not one entity can be competitive when it comes to the content of that. That's on how it was described to me when I talked to my copyright attorneys. Because it's your guys' event, it's the school's event, it isn't their event. So that's why it's, you know, to me, when I got told no, I'm being told no as a media outlet, when there's other media outlets that get told yes, or, you know, don't get told no. And to me, I just want to make sure that the school is supportive of this as a media outlet, that all media outlets are the same until otherwise found out that we can't.
So have we had Owatonna Live here or other radio stations? Haven't they been at some of our events in the past?
yeah,
Well, you-
radio is probably far more common than anything else.
well, I know, but are they gonna start differentiating in the media? I mean,
I would think there might be an argument when the streaming is involved, perhaps, you know, I mean, that's
Yes,
a
that was my
distinct
comment
difference.
as well, that
Right.
is there a difference?
But until they tell us there is.
Right.
Well, like Joanne said, they haven't complained for the last couple of years.
Right.
You know?
They
Right.
haven't- No one's been limited, NFHS has not been limited on their streaming.
Well, and the other side of that is you can only watch stuff on that if you pay for it.
Correct.
Right.
Which, that's probably a different argument about
Right.
right or wrong, but you know, it's not like that's wide open to anybody to watch. You have to have a subscription in
Yeah.
order to view that. So,
When we talk about your service, are there expectations from the school district?
The only thing that I expect is a cooperation like you would with any other media outlet.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
accommodations. There is no financial obligation, there is nothing that I'm coming for the school for. I am willing to do the other sports, but there is a sponsorship dollar amount that we have to raise before I will do the other sports.
Sure.
Once that's raised, which wrestling has already done so, I'm happy to do the rest of the sports.
But as it stands right now, what you're talking about in the wrestling program, there is no expectation besides you probably need some plugins.
Yeah, it's chairs,
Sure.
internet, you know, the same media stuff that any media outlet would
Sure.
ask for.
Any other questions for Dan?
Just a question. You said you did share your streaming with NFHS before and that you were not going to do that this year. If you did, and I don't know what the answer is, but if you did, would you be considered a media outlet yourself, or would you be under the NFHS umbrella and you're streaming through them? They can't say no because it's through them, not through you.
So where the legality came in with talking with the copyright attorneys is I created that content. If I want to have any type of ownership over that content,
Oh, you can't.
I would have to have an agreement with NFHS
Okay.
for my content.
Okay.
And they're unwilling to sign one. So I'm not going to share
Okay,
my creativity with them.
right. That makes sense.
That's
Thank you
kind of
for your
how that
answer.
looked.
Yep.
I guess I would,
So there's our distinction.
what's that?
That's our distinction
Sure.
versus the last year's.
Right, right, moving forward. And to Rich's point, no action means nothing changes.
Right.
But something is changing, in that he's no longer sharing his content. Did you talk with Sean and Dan as to why they were changing their viewpoint this year?
I think the understanding of the contract or the agreement that we have with NFHS, as it's read, there's questions, and playing it safe rather than making a violation to this agreement or contract.
I just find it kind of curious that midway through a contract, they sit down and read it.
No,
What would cause them to do that?
Well, my opinion, if you want my opinion, I'm asking permission versus just go ahead and doing it like Owatonna Live does. Owatonna Live just shows up.
And I think that's part of why more detail or more reflection is given into that contract, that it is changing in 3 years again, that the assumption I'm making is year one of NFHS, everyone was kind of hands-on, this is them, and they're kind of doing things. The second year it changed a little bit, the third year it changed a little bit, now Owatonna Live is coming in.
Owatonna Live has been doing other schools for many years
Okay.
with the same thing, so it's not, it just so happens, I'm picking on them because they were just at the football game against Blooming Prairie in Richland. I mean, that was right in your stands that they had set up. So that's kind of where I go back to my statement where, what, do I not ask permission? I mean,
Right.
that's not
Sure.
my
Right.
style. I'd rather
Right.
ask permission.
No,
than
and we
have cooperation.
appreciate that, and a great conversation here. I think it's, you know, again, we're not complaining about a product or a
No,
service here.
I
and-
just
and
want
yes,
to be treated
yes.
like everybody else is
Right.
kind of what I'm asking for. And, you know, since nobody else has been told no, why am I being told no? Is
Sure.
kind of,
Yeah.
is the reason for asking the question.
Yep.
Okay.
So, sorry for taking so much
No,
time.
no, and this is good.
Not a good conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of unorthodox public.
Yeah,
statement.
yeah, it's a little bit different because we do want to respect where you're at in the agenda, and it's not that we can't make an agenda item out of it, but I still would defer over to, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but my feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this needs no, I think we're better off to not take action on it. It's a past practice. We are not changing anything from past practice. So media outlets are welcome to our, Joanne, feel
But
free
he's
to.
getting a different message from administration,
Right,
so that's why it came to the board.
right.
Right.
So unless we can assure him that he's gonna get that message that you were just
Well,
saying
I
from
think,
the
I think we would ask Mr. Mayak to translate that back, right?
Okay,
Is that,
that's fine.
is that where we would be?
That was my statement to Dan. Now, maybe for clarity's sake, if the head football coach approached the athletic director or myself and said, Owatonna Live is here, they're doing a terrible job, their statements and whatnot, they're not
One-sided,
accustomed to what we want as a school district, I would like them to not be part of football broadcasts. I think we would honor that request and then have the conversation with any other sort of media group that is coming in and saying, either change your ways or we're gonna put our foot down and
Sure.
because of actions not allowed. So, again, that would be, again, if our athletic director or head wrestling coach said, I just don't like the way Dan comes in and pushes things around.
But that would open up a conversation
Sure,
at that point on
right.
how to correct those actions if
Right.
that was an issue.
Right,
So
right.
Exactly, but we're
I-
not there. I think we're all on the same page of saying that the reason you were told no was because of the concern of violating
Correct.
an agreement.
That's.
Is the way I understand
would
it.
agree with
But
that.
I think we give that authority back to Mr. Mayak to have that conversation and reassure that that is truly the case.
Yep.
And give you the authority to handle this
Yep.
situation instead
Yep.
of trying to make a motion that covers it and take
I agree.
action.
And that's what I shared with Dan
Sure,
prior.
if you're in agreement with that, if that's any type of an answer, hey,
that's fine. So
Yes.
basically your comment is that we already have a standing media policy
Correct.
and we're just gonna continue to follow it.
correct.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Based off of Mr. Mayak's discussion with the other people involved on that, but I think that would be the right unless there's someone else that wants to add anything to that. Okay,
Thank
fair
you for
enough.
your time.
Thank you for
Thanks,
your
Dan.
time.
Thank you.
Ms. Petzinger, do you?
Well, mine was actually to back up Dan Pexinger.
We were
And you
hoping
hit
that you were
most
up
of
to
it, but so you can hear it from my standpoint. I hope, and thank you, Lord, for listening to me and let me come on. I am a single parent. I'm Annabelle's mother. For those who don't know, I'm the one that's always gone because I'm with. Even though I'm out of the military, I still work for the government. I also have another wrestler that Makota, Michigan, that's sitting back there. They didn't know that you had to sign up five business days before, otherwise they would have comments also. So I'm going to cover both of us of why we want to have Dan continue to do his, I think is an excellent job. Because I went ahead and got NFHS. I'm sorry, I call it a different four-letter word because it is only worked less than 50% of the time. Because I am the one that's gone. When Nick and Annabelle, both of my children, Nick graduated last year, I could not watch, well, football people are this, but for wrestling, it's even worse. You couldn't tell what, they never put the scoreboard up. You have to wait for Mr. Dolmeyer to say something and hope that the camera is going to pick it because the Pixelot, unless they're piping in Daniel's feed on NHF, I'll just say that network. I couldn't, you didn't know what the scores was. Wrestling is different than any other of your other sports. I know we all have special, but for wrestling, because, well, I do have 4 brothers that all wrestled for NRHEG, you have your individual wrestlers, and they have their points, and you have that going on. Then it all goes up into a team, so they're still a team. But that extra part that you were already bringing up, but having that both clocks sitting on both of the feed on the YouTube, what it is that I know my own kids, even before the match was done, if they lost, they were back on that YouTube, going ahead texting it, seeing which one was wrong. If they thought that I know some refs have even went back and they have looked at it after I've gone ahead at state and stuff have came back. Also, when you talk about that other network, they are not covering your conferences, your regions, or anything of that when they're going to finals, or with wrestling, they have weekend tournaments. Those are not even out there. I'm here to tell you. So I pulled up both. I would go ahead on the YouTube channel, you get it live. If I don't know if it's live, I know that as soon as it's done, the raw footage is out there. On that other network, all I got was a RoboCop, or the Robo, we'll get back with you. And I went back then afterwards to see if they put in the live footage. No, if they didn't have the feed that was coming through to capture it at the beginning, it's not in the feed at the end. So what I'm bringing up is that each one of these wrestlers I know have taken their footage, since it's on YouTube, and because each coach teaches just a little bit different, they can get a different type of angle and a little bit of how to help them be a better wrestler. So, did I cover that about right? The other thing so there's the accessibility, there's the reliability. You have a phone any place. I am a single parent, but also you have parents that have kids that are different ranges. So one's off at gymnastics, another one's at wrestling. Well, when one parent can't be at the other kid's event, they could pull up the YouTube and watch it right away. Versus the other network, it would break down all the time. I'm here to tell you that. So that's one thing to think about. I'm not putting it down, but they need some better reliability of theirs. That's about all my points I have, because I really think you have some kids that can't make it to sporting events. They come from households where they go to school, they go home. There isn't extra money for them to go back in the evening. They can go on that YouTube. I'm calling it that. I'm not singling out, because maybe it'll be a different media. But they can watch their high school on YouTube, and they can come back the next morning and be part of the group conversation. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We have that resolved with deferring into Mr. Mayak to address that. So thank you again for everyone joining us and sharing your thoughts. That moves us into the superintendent's report. Mr. Mayak, please.
Yeah, a couple things I just want to talk about, share with you, and bring to your attention. In the newsletters, I've talked about the MASA legislative committee that I'm part of. We've met a couple times. Our second meeting is actually tomorrow. A pretty neat committee to be part of. Just talking about the Superintendent's Association that obviously works pretty closely with the School Board Association and whatnot on our legislative platform moving into the 23 legislative session. So obviously the state surplus, the budget, the extra funds that are there it's a huge topic. How that can, or the platform that our associations are going to move forward with and seeking additional funds from the state. And a lot of it is dealing with the cross subsidy and really the special education formula and getting that a little bit more equitable or fair for the school district. So like I said, tomorrow we'll have our second committee meeting, and as a social studies nerd, I'll continue to pass along that fun, exciting legislative information. Second, I did attend last week the state NRHEG conference in Brainerd, the Rural Education Association. I haven't always been a big fan of different conferences and whatnot, and have felt the obligation to attend, and every so often I would attend that. And this year I've actually got to the MASA conference, state conference, and the NREA conference, and they've been fantastic. One of the session at MREA that stood out the most was a rural Minnesota or rural America kind of movement with housing, and how housing availability affects districts like ours. It's the move in, move out, move over type of a theory that we don't always have an unlimited amount of houses available, and we have oftentimes in smaller communities we have families without children living in large houses, and instead of having two 60-year-old people live in a 5-bedroom house, wouldn't it be nice if they moved over to a smaller house and put a 5-bedroom house up for sale in our community? Which is a lot of us And actually, one of the superintendents sitting near me said, I am your poster child. My wife and I live in a 5-bedroom house. It's been our house forever. There's no way I'm gonna mention to my wife that we move out of our house. But we are exactly, you know, that person was exactly what we're talking about. So, you know, I think as we look at our communities and the potential for growth and knowing that there's a apartment complex and whatnot, those are things that as superintendent, as board, that we engage in those conversations with our cities. Let's find out what we can do to encourage some moving over and moving in and eliminate as much moving out of the district and the communities as we can. So, again, nothing other than just some information to share, but it was pretty interesting, and maybe you're more in touch with that than I am, but that was my first introduction to that concept of moving in and moving over. We have one speaker, but let me, Mr. Kopetsky is ill today, and Macy's got a sick child at home, so they can't come and present their information, but Mr. Budd is here, and he'll go through some information with you. Myself, Angie, and Scott, Scott Schuler, our Buildings and Grounds, Angie, obviously our tech, and I have been meeting with some local or some area technology companies, talking more about our alarm systems and our camera systems, our PA systems, intercoms, and right now we have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And what we're looking at is how we can better streamline some of that. This last summer, there was a situation during summer school where a fire alarm in our secondary building went off, and there was no response from the local fire department, which was a huge red flag, like, why the alarms are going off? And we found out then there was quite a bit of our system offline. And Flexcom is someone that we work with. Johnson Controls through Simplex is someone we work with. They work on the same system, and a lot of, well, that's their system. We monitor, and 14 phone calls later trying to find out this information. So that was kind of the catalyst of how can we streamline this? How can we have one go-to phone call that is really in charge of all the different systems that we have out there. So that will probably be more of our Buildings and Grounds Committee discussion at our next meeting. But I think once we get different quotes, see what different companies have to offer, we can work towards streamlining and being more efficient with that sort of thing. Scott and I also had a meeting today with Garland. Remember the whole leaky roof situation here? That's still not resolved. A lot of finger pointing, a lot of history and emails going back and forth, and basically we got a quote that says to fix this would be about $48,000. And one company said, no way, this is crazy. The roofing warranty, Garland says, if you would have done this from the beginning, we wouldn't have leaky roofs. Our warranty would be in place, and some people weren't following some of the rules. So that's still out there. We still have this roof that leaks, and we're getting closer, but we're still not there to getting some resolution on let's get this fixed and who's going to pay the bill to fix it.
Is that Garland and Knutson? Or is that
Garland is
the roof?
the roof that did
Yeah.
most or all of our roofs in the district, and with some of the last construction projects and the facade up here, they took some steps that they should have. They meaning Knutson or ISG, because they know that they can't change anything without affecting our warranty.
Okay.
But some things were changed without Garland's
Stamp of
approval. Right.
Okay.
So, a lot of finger pointing. We heard quite a bit last year, and I would say probably 2 years ago was really bad with the leaks and the pictures of water, ice, and everything on the windowsills. There was some improvement. It was one belief that the tape, heat tape, would free the flow up of the ice and the snow and whatnot and allow it to drain properly. And I think there is validity in that. But then in August or this summer, when we had a heavy rain in town, there was a leaking going on. And so it's more than just ice and snow buildup. There's something that isn't right, done properly. The last thing that I have, some information was shared over the weekend too, that January 2nd is a national holiday. Actually, Deb happens to be here, the one that has some information as well, as we're looking into it. On our current calendar for this January 2nd, as a Monday, is that a legal holiday or not? Can we have school with Sunday being the first? And apparently some other districts in the state are moving that to a holiday. Now again, is that a requirement? Is that a choice of ours? Put that on your radar that we probably in December are going to have to act one way or the other on what to do with January 2nd, depending on, I guess, law or statute, moving that forward.
Any questions for Mr. Mayak?
I'll turn it over to Dave if he's got some information to share.
Just a couple of quick things, and you've probably been able to see the slideshow. Really neat deal, relatively new organization, the DECA, and they got to go up to the cities and compete. I think there was somewhere around 500 or so people that were supposed to be there. Just a really neat thing, and congratulations to Allie and Tatum. They won medals in the Principles of Marketing Role Play competition. So it's really interesting, and one of my kids is joined, and he's the quiet one. And it was really neat to hear his perspective too, that it was a really neat and challenging thing, and kind of busting some folks out of their shell a little bit too. So very, very neat, and I'm appreciative of that opportunity. The other thing I wanted to mention was the Veterans Day program was outstanding. It was wonderful. And hats off to Mrs. Reeder, who did a lot of the work, Mr. Zidlicki, and high school student ambassadors. So great community event. I was actually getting a little bit nervous, and we had Scott and I are shuffling more chairs down in the back of the gym, which was a great thing. We haven't been able to do that for a couple of years. And so we were so happy to open up our doors and have that many folks in there. And it was awesome. The 3rd through 5th grade came, and just a wonderful event. So short of that, that's about all I have. You can see the rest of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ben. Are there any board member comments this evening?
I just want to thank all coaches and congratulate all of our athletes on successful seasons.
Anything else? We'll move into information and communications. Mark your calendars. Exciting meeting of the year is the Truth and Taxation meeting. We'll start half hour prior to our regularly scheduled December 19th in the secondary school media center at 6 p.m. for that. Like I said, followed by the regular monthly meeting. And then that organizational meeting will be scheduled for Monday, January 2nd, pending, I suppose, some of our
Yeah.
information that we get.
And that would be by choice too, that
Sure.
we're absolutely fine having the meeting that night.
Sure,
So, as a
might work out
I would
just fine.
consider it to be
Sure.
on schedule.
Okay. With that, it brings us to the consent agenda items. Mr. Maya? please.
Yeah, as always, the consent agenda, the items on this agenda have been, you've been provided some background information on these. We'll act on the agenda items as one vote without discussion. If the board member, any board member wants to discuss an item, we'll pull that from the consent agenda and vote on that separately. And as a note, Mr. Schmidt's resignation and hiring is already removed from the consent agenda and separated, so he doesn't have to abstain from consent agenda. Before we move on to that, I would just make note of the donations that have been made this month. We have a $175 donation from NRHEG PTO for some scooter storage. We have a $462.47 donation, again from NRHEG PTO, for 3 commercial food warmers that the FACS classes will be using. We have a $500 donation for our Community Ed cheer team from the New Richland Legion. And then Rose Weber had a donation of a trombone to our school district. All total, $1,137.47, bringing our year-to-date to $87,343.22. And with those acknowledgements, I'd ask for your approval of the consent agenda as outlined.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Ms. Maloney to approve the consent agenda items as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 21-22 World's Best Workforce Summary Report and Goals.
So it would give me a reason to question your statement of the most exciting
I did.
meeting in truth and taxation. And,
I was sad that I used it already when I got to
this
this.
one could potentially rival that. Actually, there's 3 different components of our World's Best Workforce presentation. There is a public meeting that is not part of a board meeting, and so we'll have to add that. And I'm going to keep looking at Terry here as our World's Best Workforce expert. That there was some learning that took place today on the requirements. So the 3 components are to have a public meeting, which we will do yet, to present to the board the 22-23, this year's World's Best Workforce goals, and then present last year's data or results based on the goals for your approval, and then that will be submitted to the state as we're required to do so. Correct?
We don't need the board's approval for the results. That's just information.
Okay.
They approve our plan going forward for
Right.
22,
Okay,
23.
thank you.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Yes. So I'll share with you our goals for 22 for this school year, 22-23. We'll act and approve those, and then it's official. Correct? Can you enlarge that at all? Okay. So really, the next slide here is the 5 areas that our goals have to be set upon to meet the qualifications or meet the criteria for World's Best Workforce. We have to have.
Next to the yellow box.
Yep. Okay, the goal areas are making sure our students are ready for kindergarten, a 3rd grade reading proficiency goal, achievement gap goal, that we are preparing all students for career and post-secondary education, and we must have a goal that centers around students graduating from high school. The next slide then is our goal number 1, our goal that has been set by September of '22 and moving forward, because we're continuing some of these goals from previous years, moving them forward. So starting a couple years ago and now thereafter, it is our goal that 80% of our students within the district attend our preschool program. Okay, we've been short of that 80% in the past, and obviously we continue to work on more of our students attending our preschool. How are we going to accomplish that goal? Obviously, we have different things in place. That part in the red is some of the requirements that the state specifies as far as immunizations, age limits or specification with age. But then what we do internally is professional development, our enhancement programs. The CRAT is the kindergarten readiness assessment tool. So we do all these things obviously to prepare our students to get ready for kindergarten. If you look at the next slide, some of the things that are currently taking place, our Bridges program is a huge program that it is included in this goal for students that aren't or don't meet the specifications aren't ready for the regular kindergarten program. Our Bridges program, which is a funded program from the state, is a huge step in making sure that our students are successful and ready for kindergarten and beyond. Macy, through our community ed program, has done a fantastic job reaching out to our residents, especially our new residents, and making sure that they're aware of the programs that we have to offer. Different brochures, social media obviously is part of her job here as well with Facebook. Reaching out to the cities and to the city administration to have different flyers and emails and just getting the word out. So again, our community members are aware of the program that we have. And through those efforts, those actions, and implementing these things, it's our goal that we're going to get 80% of our students attending our preschool program. Okay, the second goal, again, just to recap, we have the 5. Our second goal is to have our 3rd grade students that they can read at grade level. The next slide then says, we will continue to, our goal is to have our students meeting 80% proficiency on the MCA reading assessment. How are we going to accomplish this? Oops, sorry. We use Fontes and Pinnell. We use a STAR reading assessment. We have our regular grade level reading assessments. We have responsive instruction. We have our AmeriCorps math, AmeriCorps reading. We have our interventionists throughout the district. The elementary has specific reading and math interventionists. At the secondary school, our 6th grade includes a reading program or reading class that all students have in addition to their English or language arts courses. There is part-time intervention of some sorts at the secondary level as well, but most of that intervention is really through that reading program in 6th grade. So this is what we're doing right now to help us achieve that goal of meeting or getting to the state proficiency level. Within our district, proficiency would be at or above the state average. All right, recap, we have 5. Our 3rd is the achievement gap between students, that we close that achievement gap. And this one's a little bit tricky for a district like ours. Typically, achievement gap we'll see between different subgroups of students, and oftentimes those subgroups would be a minority student group versus the white Caucasian group. In our district, with the lack of diversity or the small amount of diversity we have, we really see that distinguish, or the differences, the categories being social economical categories or special ed, special needs services. So the elementary and the secondary goal are pretty standard. Obviously, at the elementary, if we are striving to have our students, or 80% of our students, increase their reading proficiency by 1 grade level, they're improving. Students may increase 1 grade level in their proficiency, but they still might not meet proficiency on the MCA test, but they're growing, they're improving, they're getting closer. And so obviously that's kind of that cornerstone that we would use to build on. At the secondary level, again, kind of a secondary goal is the more success the students have in the classroom, the greater students achieve, and we can close that achievement gap. So the goal is to decrease the amount of failing grades that our students receive. And then, yeah. The district-wide goal, the achievement, or closing the achievement gap, would be looking at our free and reduced lunch students and our special needs, our special education service students, comparing that to all student groups. And the goal there is, our goal is that gap between those subgroups would be at or below the same gap across the state.
Was there talk about changing the secondary goal?
Yes. I think this is a fairly generic goal, and obviously all secondary teachers could give everyone a D- that deserve an F, and now we've accomplished their goal. Is there validity, is there value in that? So it should be looked at. It hasn't changed for now, and some of the, if we look at the next slides, the validity holds true with the different programs that we have in place. The after-school homework help type programs, the REACH program, the interventionists again, the AmeriCorps title, all of those things. Title's not a secondary level program, but all of those things will help students achieve a passing grade. And then if they are achieving a passing grade, obviously then there's growth, there's improvement, and that achievement gap can shrink. But
Doesn't necessarily correlate though between, I mean, I agree with you, they're growing and
Yeah.
doing better, but it's really hard to draw a line from, 15 students did better, they're not failing anymore.
Right.
And then you look
Right.
at them, you'd have to look directly at each one of those kids.
and know some of this background too,
Yes.
why they're getting
Yeah.
a passing grade instead of a failing grade, because of these programs that are in place.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not really a smart goal.
It can be, but it's also easy to criticize.
Right.
How can that be? I think if we know this information on why we're seeing less failing grades, it adds to the strength of that goal. I'm in agreement, at some point we should change that,
Yeah.
because it can be questioned. But it remains in place for next school year.
When we go to that specific area and the percentages, I don't know if this is a fair question, is there a consistent percentage of failing grades in our secondary? Either via, I mean, is it?
And how are we
is-
gonna get that
is-
data?
Is it 5%, is it 10, or isn't that? Because when you take 10%, well, you take 20% of 10% failing, we're not asking for a lot.
No.
But in not that obviously create it the way you want to, but I would hope that the percentage of failing grades is not large on a percentage basis, but, and I
The
don't
information that I'm remembering was kind of a number.
Okay.
There was X amount of failing grades first semester of last school year.
Okay.
There was X amount of failing grades second semester of last
Sure.
year.
So you'd have to do the math to get
Yeah.
that percentage thing.
Yeah.
But
And I
Mr. Bunn, it's maybe a little more fair for you, question for you. I mean, does that number fluctuate drastically between semesters and then annually? Or do you see that number?
It can, one other, or a couple other factors which, you know, I think leads to what Terry was talking about. You know, you could have a kid that fails 4 classes or
Okay.
5 or whatever, and one that only failed 1 potentially. You know,
Sure.
so.
Well,
that-
then another factor in all of that is absenteeism. I
Sure.
mean, if the kids are absent, they're not, you know, they're
Yeah.
not gonna.
Goes hand in hand,
It goes
doesn't it?
hand in hand, yeah.
And I think, as I think about this too, if it truly is a weak goal, why are we including it? We do have different objectives too on the report that we have to
Right.
check off. And this allows us to check that off. Now, does that mean it's more valid? It means it's a requirement that we have to have the objectives, and
Right.
I think this is more maybe a standard.
Sure.
It takes more.
I don't
digging
mean to
into.
dwell on
No,
it,
it's-
on that subject, but, you know, I'm all about putting goals out there that we can
Yeah,
meet.
right.
But on the flip side of it, it'd really be neat to get all our kids passing
Sure.
there, you know,
Right.
getting them
Yeah.
credit. This seems like a
Right.
grain of sand in the sandbox almost,
Yeah.
that end of it, but.
But through these programs, again, that's
Right.
where the meat of the goal comes from. We have these
Right.
programs in place to help students out, to give them the opportunity, to help them
Yes.
take advantage of that opportunity as much as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, a recap, we are now on goal 4 that we have to make sure that we include in our report. So the 4th goal is to have students ready for career and post-secondary education. Our goal is that, if you look at the bottom of the statement, 5 years ago, our students were not participating in these different events, or I'll keep using the word, generic word, opportunity. Our goal is to get all of our students participating in the MCIS, or the Minnesota Career Information System, the career cluster survey, the interest assessments, online portfolios. The programs that are out there are absolutely available to us, are geared towards aligning with a career and college ready program. So we went from not having these programs in place to, by the end of next school year, making sure everyone is participating in these assessments and in these opportunities. And again, some of the things that are taking place to go along with that, our school counselor is having academic planning sessions. We all are familiar with IEPs. There's also a PLP, of the personalized learning plans. Our students, was it freshmen, just took a trip here recently, a career development, a career exploration trip. We do offer the ACT, the PSAT. We have a variety of different classes that have different pathways. Obviously, there's science graduation requirements, and outside of biology and chemistry and physics, our students are able to take plant science and food science that meet the requirements for the science graduation standards. So that these pathways, and pathway is a catchphrase about education now, that our students do have the opportunity to look into different career pathways and utilize those programs, plus a different college in the classroom courses that we have alongside the PSEO opportunities for students to take advantage and get their college credits. And then we'll move on to goal number 5, making sure that we have goals set in place on our graduation rates. And if you thought some of this other stuff was confusing, graduation rates falls right in line. That if the next slide, Sue, that our goal is that we would meet or exceed the state average as far as our graduation rate goes for a 4-year graduation rate, and then there's a 7-year graduation rate. When I think of graduation rates, I think of how many students started with us as freshmen, how many of those people graduated 4 years later. Do the math, that's our graduation rate, but that's not how it works. So that's why you have 4-year rates, and maybe Mr. Bunn can explain it real easily, but basically if a student starts with us as a freshman, they're on our record and count towards our graduation rate if they leave the district or not. That, you know, they could transfer and they're still part of our calculations, and so there's some things, again, why we have does it take them 4 years to get through a Minnesota school, or does it take them 7 years with special ed services and so on and so forth. So the bottom line is we want to stay, everyone plays by the same rules. We want our students to, in our district, to have the graduation rate the same or better than the state average, and at least maintain that 97% with our 7-year graduation rate. And what are we doing to accomplish that goal? Our REACH program, Accelis, Mr. Bunn uses the Accelis online program for some credit recovery. Looking and working with our counselor, the credit deficiencies, the different career pathways that we talked about, and the opportunities they have for, again, those science classes or different CTE type courses. Having those in place obviously helps us reach that goal of getting as many students graduating as we possibly can. So my recommendation would be to accept the goals that have been established in those 5 criteria, and then next year we'll report how we did on those goals with the data and the information that's collected through the different assessments and graduation rates and so on.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have this in our motions, Mr. Maya, but do you want us to make a motion to
Yeah.
accept the presentation?
Yes.
For the plan.
I'm sorry.
Right.
For number 10, yes.
So, be entertaining a motion to approve the 21-22 World's Best Workforce Summary Report as presented.
It's not the summary, it's the goals.
22, 23 goals. And
Goals,
that's what,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's what.
22, 23 goals
Okay.
for the world's best workforce.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Ms. Engel to approve the 21-22 World Best Workforce 22-23 goals
Yes.
as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just a reminder, at the December meeting, then we'll present the 21-22 data results.
To be approved at the December meeting
That's just a
then.
presentation.
Okay, that's just information. Got it.
It's usually given
Okay.
before, you usually get it, remember we come
Yes.
a half
Yep.
hour early,
Got it.
and I would entertain you guys with all that data, yeah.
Remember that well.
At the same
did a
meeting
fine
as
job.
truth and taxation?
N- Oh, no, we don't have to do it before.
Okay.
Probably have the same attendance.
Yeah, that's right.
8 of us.
As a public meeting though, did you say that it is not a board meeting?
No, it's a public.
It's a
Right.
public
Right.
information, so
Yep.
I have no
you're
choice.
gracious of 7 of you to show up.
I don't know what you guys are
Yeah,
We
to break
missed it.
those into 2, but anyway, we'll talk about that. Time of the year for a resolution to combine polling places, Mr. Maya?
Yeah. Pretty straightforward again, that I would ask for your approval on the resolution to combine the polling places, as stated.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Engel, seconded by Mr. Schoenrock to approve the resolution to combine polling places. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have before us the 24-25 school year calendar. As Mr. Mayak pointed out earlier in the meeting, there may be already a complication, but we can always come back and amend, so.
So the complication would actually be on this current calendar.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, oh, yeah,
And
sorry.
the irony of
Yeah.
having the 24-25 calendar approved is for convenience and a
course.
courtesy to the parents and families, so they
Absolutely.
can plan accordingly. And then we have something like
Right,
January
that's true.
2nd pop up that may make us alter that calendar anyways. But again, the premise still stands that as a courtesy, we'd like to have 2 school years posted on our website. And the 24-25 is pretty straightforward. A couple notes that September 2nd is the day after Labor Day, so it's a nice early start, which then allows us to end on May 30th, which is, it just sounds nicer when we're done in May, not June. And it's just the convenience of that 24-25 calendar. So I'd ask for your recommendation, I recommend your approval on the 24-25 school calendar.
I move to approve the 24-25 school year calendar.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Maloney, seconded by Mr. Schmidt to approve the 24-25 school year calendar as presented. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Have before us a resignation followed by employment. Mr. Schmidt will be abstaining from this if you want to make that note. Mr. Mayak, the resignation of Dan Schmidt as JV boys basketball coach, please.
Yeah, and I would ask for your approval with the understanding that the resignation is followed by a hire as a head coach, but to approve the resignation of Dan Schmidt as a JV boys basketball coach.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Engel, second by Ms. Maloney to approve the resignation of Dan Schmidt as JV boys basketball coach. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And now we will move into the hiring of Dan Schmidt as the head boys basketball coach. Mr. Mayak, please.
Again, with the logical step with that resignation comes the recommendation to hire Dan as our head boys basketball coach for the 22-23 basketball season.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Schoenrock to approve Dan Schmidt as the head boys basketball coach. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Concludes our business for this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Engel, seconded by Mr. Mueller to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Can we, since, does it matter where we put this in the minutes? Can we?
So.
Okay.